Hello everyone, I'm your narrator from Grave Hush, and I'm here to help you unwind tonight. I know many of you use these stories to fall asleep, so before we begin, don't forget to like the video and subscribe to the channel. Also, where in the world are you listening from? And what time is it for you right now? Now, get cozy, take a deep breath, let your body sink into the stillness. It's time to relax and let the story carry you into sleep. Our first story tonight. I grew up in a pretty poor household. When you grow up poor, you learn not to waste anything or take anything for granted. At least, that's what I tell my wife, who's constantly nagging me to take care of my hoarding issues. Certain habits followed me even as I became an adult with a steady job. I still make sure to squeeze the last bit of toothpaste from the tube. I tend to ignore the expiration dates on my aspirins and Benadryls. And I still try to solve all my problems with duct tape that I dug out from the bins of a nearby hardware store. That, of course, won't clean up the garage full of junk I have, as Gina calls it. People think that dumpster diving is shameful or embarrassing. But that couldn't be further from the truth. I learned very quickly from a young age that people are inherently wasteful. Grocery stores throw out products that are close to their expiration dates. College move-out dates are treasure troves for TVs and organizer bins. I've accidentally come across rare jewelry from yard sales where families were tossing their dead grandmother's belongings. You get the picture. Just as a disclaimer, not everything you find in a dumpster is edible or even viable. Sometimes you get moldy fruits, blackened veggies, slightly opened bags of chips, mattresses with bed bugs, furniture beyond repair, and you just have to let those go. You eventually learn to differentiate between one man's trash and another man's treasure. But some things you find in dumpsters and on the streets have inexplicable origins. I've found some weird things in dumpsters that I've saved over the years and forgot about until recently. Now, as I clean my garage up, I want to share some of these strange knickknacks that I've accumulated over the years, because I feel like this subreddit would appreciate them. I'll start with something that gave me nightmares for a week. Gina forced me into the garage and told me she wouldn't let me back in the house until at least a corner of the garage was completely Marie Kondoed. Looking at the messy, cluttered garage gave me a headache, but I suppose it was a headache. I started. I will admit, I do have a hoarding problem, and it was only made worse by years of accumulating things from various dumpster dives. I sifted through boxes and boxes of baseball cards, old sneakers, rollerblades, and raggedy clothes, all the while asking myself if any of these items brought me joy. The answer was no. Most of the items were pretty much junk that I thought would be useful at some point. After a few hours of sorting through stuff, I finally happened across something interesting. At the very bottom of the pile was an old, vintage Polaroid camera in its original packaging and everything. This one brought up a lot of memories. My first girlfriend, Sally Herman, my first kiss, and my first breakup. I found this in '06 in a dumpster bin behind a local camera store. I snuck behind the store to scour through its bins out of sheer boredom and curiosity, and seemingly hit gold. Nestled in between black garbage bags was this Polaroid camera. It looked to be in good condition and was in its original packaging and everything. I figured this would be a nice birthday gift for Sally, who just so happened to be getting into photography at the time. To put the icing on top, a bunch of new film was tossed right next to the Polaroid. It was perfect, or so I had thought. Sally was ecstatic. She had been wanting a nice Polaroid for a long time. She didn't need to know I basically got it for free. She wanted to use it right away, so we drove to a nearby beach to take some nice pictures. "Charlie, look here." Sally quickly snapped. A picture of me while the cold beach water lapped at my feet. I wasn't ready. I laughed. She pulled the film from the slot and began to shake it. "Take some of me," she demanded, pushing the camera into my hands. I snapped a few photos of her with the ocean in the background. We took random pictures of the scenery. We even turned the camera and tried to squeeze into the small frame and take one together. This was a time before iPhones and selfies became ubiquitous, so we had to be creative. It would have been a great day had the film not given us issues. There. Not developing, Sally's eyebrows scrunched up as she continued to shake the film. "Give it a few seconds." "I heard you're not supposed to shake it," I said. "You're supposed to keep it away from light. Tuck it under your armpit." "Oh," Sally muttered as she put the Polaroid between her armpit awkwardly. We stood in silence for a moment, before she took it out again, only to be disappointed by the blank film. "That's so weird." I brought the Polaroid closer to my face to examine it. It certainly seemed flawless, aside from the dented box I had found it in. Maybe there was something wrong with it after all. Looks like it's faulty merchandise. "Where did you get this from?" Sally asked. "Maybe we can return it." "Oh, you know, the camera store on the corner of Main and Maple." "You mean Fred's Cameras and Imaging?" Sally seemed confused. "Charlie, that place closed down a few months ago." "Huh, no way. I was just there yesterday." "Yeah, Fred and my dad are buddies. He had to close the shop because of a rat infestation from the Italian place right next door. It's pretty much just an empty storefront." After a long conversation, Sally figured out that I didn't, in fact, purchase this camera, and I was forced to admit that I found this in the garbage bin behind the store. I lost my first girlfriend that day, and a bit of my pride. I gained a broken camera and the useful knowledge of never regifting dumpster finds to a girl ever again. The strangest thing was, I distinctly remembered seeing someone behind the cash register through the glass windows of the store. It wasn't Fred, but there was definitely someone there, and the store didn't look empty at all. In fact, it looked like it was still in business. I remember I had to be sneaky about going to the bins behind the store because I didn't want to be caught. But when I went back later that day, the store was indeed empty, and the bins were completely barren as well. That was quite an unwanted trip down memory lane. I sighed as I dug through the Polaroid box for those pictures. After that disastrous date, I had stashed the Polaroid and the blank films into the box and shoved it where the light didn't shine. I never wanted to look at them again, but figured I may as well try to check if they had magically developed over the years. Give myself something to laugh about and cringe over. The films weren't blank anymore. I did a double take, confused as all hell as I scanned the films. I knew my memory wasn't failing me. These films were blank when we checked on the beach, and they were most definitely blank when I shoved them into the box all those years ago. They were faded and dusty, but they were reminiscent of the pictures we took that day. The picture of me being caught off guard, pictures of Sally posing, the selfie of us. But they just weren't quite right. There was no ocean in the background. In fact, it didn't seem like we were at the beach at all. Instead, the films showed something strange. The picture of me caught off guard seemed blurred out, and all you could see was a vague silhouette against a hazy burgundy-red background, almost like a sunset, even though we were at the beach on a sunny afternoon. I would have chalked it up to faulty film if it weren't for the fact that as each single shot of Sally progressed, her facial expressions began to look increasingly concerned. I distinctly remember her laughing for the photos, and the concerned expressions on her face in the photographs were beginning to send chills down my back. The selfie of us was more focused on a frowning Sally, with my face blurred out, and to the side. All of the pictures were definitely from that day, yet they also weren't at the same time. I grabbed the Polaroid, turning it around to examine it from different angles. It looked just as new as it did when I gave it to Sally, save for the dust that had accumulated on the surface. I peered into the lens, shook it around a bit, opened the battery compartment. Nothing had changed. I pressed the button on the Polaroid in an attempt to see if it still worked. And to my surprise, it actually began to print out a picture. But before I could put it down, more pictures suddenly spat out of the camera. I struggled to keep the pictures from haphazardly scattering across the floor as the Polaroid rapid spat out photograph after photograph. I figured maybe the camera was backed up on photos, if that was even possible. But after all this time, when no one had used it in years, the camera seemed to be on auto capture mode as it finally spent the last of its film, and I heard a strange winding down sound. The camera then shut down. I tried pressing the button again, but nothing happened. The pictures began to develop in my hands, and I held my breath as I saw what formed on the little square films. All the pictures involved Sally in some way or another. I tried my best to arrange the photographs in the way they were spat out. The first few films seemed relatively innocuous for a camera that just randomly spat out pictures I didn't take. They were all of Sally, but from perspectives that suggested she wasn't aware of the photographs being taken. One was of Sally at her college graduation, talking to her friends. One was of Sally waiting for the bus and staring off into the streets. Another showed Sally playing baseball from a strange angle, and another was of Sally checking the mail. In front of her childhood home, she looked somewhat upset and bothered in each photo. I immediately felt sick as I realized she wasn't aware in any of these photos that she was being photographed. It felt as though I was stalking her in some way. The next film showed a long, winding road with what looked like an older Sally, standing in the middle of a long, barren road, again pressed against a hazy red background. Her facial expression was indecipherable. The next few films after that showed a cornfield, an eerie shot of a scarecrow, and a broken-down shed with a decrepit windmill looming next to it. There were only a few films to check after that, and even though I felt that something was terribly wrong, I pressed on, and I really wish I hadn't. The 9th film showed Sally sleeping on what looked like a haystack, with her hands and feet tied up and her mouth gagged with cloth. The 10th showed her awake and terrified, the flash of the Polaroid illuminating her features and accentuating her horrified eyes. As I got closer to the end, the photos became more and more erratic, with strange and shaky, blurry angles that suggested a struggle. The 13th and final film was what terrified me the most. The face of a washed-out man peered into the lens. Of the camera, a set of hollow eyes and a bulbous nose looked back at me from a strange angle that suggested whoever was behind the camera was taking a picture of himself. But his eyes seemed to go beyond the frame of the photograph and peered into my own, as if he was examining me, watching me, studying me. I threw the Polaroid down on the floor and immediately pulled out my phone to look up Sally on Facebook. With shaky hands, I scrolled through various Sally Hermans until I found one who remotely looked like Sally as an older woman. If what the picture suggested was even remotely reflective of reality, she was in trouble. After I had moved away from my small town and started a family of my own, I fell out of contact with all of my old friends. As such, I had no idea what was going on with their lives. I decided this was worth reconnecting with an ex-girlfriend, over to try and figure out what these photographs were about, and to make sure she was okay. There were definitely sinister forces at play here. What I wasn't expecting, however, was for her Facebook profile to read, "Remembering Sally Herman." Countless posts littered her Facebook wall, saying things like, "You will be missed forever and rest in peace." Pictures of her and her friends smiling at graduation, of her playing baseball with her teammates, of her with a boyfriend in front of a cafe near a bus station, and her in front of her childhood home with her brother were displayed. This was most definitely Sally, and if it was, then the worst case scenario had already happened. I began scouring the posts for any hints of what had happened. Was it a disease? A freak accident? Suicide, even? I turned to Google for the answer that I was so afraid to come to terms with. Sure enough, there was an obituary for Sally and various news articles about how she had gone missing one day, only to have turned up in an abandoned shack in the middle of nowhere. It was clearly ruled out as suicide and labeled as homicide. They found her in a body bag with absolutely no signs of blunt force trauma, suffocation, or any other sign of a typical murder. Authorities suggested she may have died of shock, or perhaps of poison that had not turned up in the autopsy report. The articles stated that the perpetrator was still on the loose, and that any evidence that could lead to the capture of the murderer would be rewarded with a hefty sum of money. I shut my phone off and shoved it back in my pocket, immediately leaving the garage and the Polaroids on the floor. I needed to gather myself and process everything that I had just seen. The shack Sally was found in looked exactly like the one in the Polaroid, next to the windmill that was falling apart. A picture of the road directly aligned with the Polaroid. I had anyone with half a brain would have pinned the blame on me for having such questionable photos of Sally in the first place, and I would have had no actual, substantive explanation to give them. No one would have believed my story. I knew I had stumbled across something I wasn't supposed to see, and I also knew I had to get rid of everything. I damn near had a heart attack when I went back to the garage. My wife was picking the Polaroids off the floor, grumbling about how she always does everything in the house. I attempted to explain what they were and what had happened in the time she was gone. Gina looked confused, only stopping me to ask why I was freaking out over a bunch of blank Polaroid films. Sure enough, when she handed me the Polaroids, all the films seemed to be wiped clean of everything I saw. And look, I know I'm not crazy. I know what I saw. I trust my memory, which is why when Gina asked if she could keep the vintage camera, I said no and immediately threw it out. I wish I could say that was the weirdest thing I've found, but there have certainly been weirder things I've come across. In the meantime, if you're going to dumpster dive, be careful and be picky. You never know what you'll find. Story 1 ends here. Now, let's begin story 2. I slept at my friend's house and we were not allowed to leave the bedroom. After 9 p.m., I soon found out why. I slept at my friend's house and we were not allowed to leave the bedroom after 9 o'clock p.m. I soon found out why. We had been friends for 13 years, and in those years I had not once slept at his house. So, why the sudden invite? I asked. I settled the duffel on my shoulder and he held the door. My parents are going out, he said, and the words came out of him in a rush. Figured it's about time you saw my humble abode. The house was not a humble abode. It was a great, white clapboard house that stood on the land as if it had been there forever and the town had grown around it. Old oaks stood guard over the grounds, and their shadows fell across the yard. Inside the house there was a smell of old wood and polish and something more besides. A smell like turned earth after a rain. His mother was a woman built of small bones, and she carried a frantic smile that did not touch her eyes. She moved about the dim rooms with a nervous energy, asking of drinks and of snacks. His father sat in a leather chair, and he did not speak. He was a large man whose eyes were dark and still, and they followed us as we passed. I heard his mother whisper words to him, urgent and low, but I could not make them out. At 7 o'clock his parents left. "So, what's the plan?" I asked. I dropped my bag on the floor of his room. The room was a small island of the ordinary in that house, with its posters and its rumpled bed and the console set before the television. It was the only place that did not feel as if it belonged to the dead, pizza, video games, the usual, Leo said. He knelt and woke the machine. He moved with a forced calm, but I saw the cording in his neck. We ate the pizza and played the games, and for a time, I did not think of the house or of the silence that lay coiled in its other rooms. For a time, it was only the two of us and the sounds from the screen. Then near to 9, he paused the game. "Hey man," he said. He would not look at me, but worked the controller in his hands. "There's just one weird rule my parents have." "Weird rule, yeah." He raised his head and his eyes were serious as a stone. "After 9 p.m., we have to be in here, in the bedroom, and we can't leave. Not for anything. Not for the bathroom, not for a drink, nothing. The door stays closed until sunrise." I stared at his face and looked for the jest that was not there. "You're kidding, right? What if I have to pee?" "Pee now," he said. His voice was flat. He gestured with his chin to an empty bottle on his desk. "And after 9, you use that." The laugh I had in my throat died there. "Dude, that's insane. Why?" He shrugged his shoulders, but the motion was counterfeit. "They're just super weird about security. Old house, you know. They think it's drafty. I knew he was lying, I just didn't know why. Downstairs a clock began to chime the hour, and his head snapped toward the door. Bong, bong, bong. He was on his feet before the 9th bell had sounded its note. He crossed the room and closed the door. He slid a heavy bolt of steel into its housing, and the sound it made was final. "There," he said. A sweat had bloomed on his brow, and he breathed out the word. "We're good." "Leo, what the hell is going on?" I demanded. "Nothing, man. Just a weird rule," he said. He would not look at the door. He turned up the sound of the game until it was a roar in that small room. But I did not see the game. I saw only the bolted door, and I felt a coldness take root in my gut. The house was quiet again, but it was not the same quiet. This was a listening quiet, a waiting quiet. And in the dark heart of that house, something waited. And we were locked in that room and waiting with it. An hour passed, and there was no sound from the house. The fear went out of Leo slowly, and he played the game with a feigned calm that did not sit right on him. We played on in that silence, and a vexation grew in me at the foolishness of it all. "You really need to tell your parents this is a certifiable way to raise a serial killer," I said. He gave back a fake smile. "Tell me about it." Then came a sound from the rooms below. It was a soft and measured thumping on the boards of the main hall. "What's that?" I whispered. Leo played on. He stared at the screen, and his fingers worked the buttons as if he did not hear. "It's nothing. House settling." "That's not the house settling, Leo." The sound ceased. In the quiet, I could hear the blood in my own ears. Then there came a new sound, which was a dragging sound, a scraping of some great weight across the wood floor beneath us as of a heavy thing with broken feet. I muted the television. "Okay, that's definitely not the house," I said. Leo set the controller down upon the carpet. His face was pale in the shifting light of the screen. "Just ignore it, Liam, please. It goes away if you ignore it." "What? What is it? What?" "Goes away." Before he could answer, it spoke. The voice came from the hallway, faint at first, on the other side of our door. "Leo, honey." I did not move. The voice was his mother's voice. "Leo, sweetheart, your father and I came home early. I brought you boys some warm cookies." Open the door. I looked to Leo and saw a boy cast in tallow. He stared at the door as if it were the gate of hell itself, and he raised a trembling finger to his lips and shook his head. "Leo, that's your mum," I whispered. "Don't be silly, sweetie. We're inside," the voice said. It was just outside the door now. "I just baked your favorites. Chocolate chip. They're getting cold." The scraping from below had stopped. There was only the sweet persuasion of that voice in the silent house. But the voice was wrong. There was a terrible perfection in its sound, like a memory of a voice and not the voice itself. Then came the knocking. It was a soft and wet sound. On the far side of the door, as if a piece of meat were striking the wood. "Leo, Liam, are you boys all right in there? You're being awfully quiet." "Leo," I mouthed, but no sound came. He sat upon the floor like a man made of stone, his eyes wide with a plea that had no words. He looked like something trapped. The knob of the door turned, once to the left and once to the right. Then it began to rattle in its fitting with a growing violence. "Boys, this isn't funny," the voice said. The sweetness broke in it then, and it was replaced with a hard and ragged edge. "Open the door." A great blow struck the door, and the frame of it groaned in the wall. I scrambled away from it on my hands and feet until my back was against the far wall of the room. The voice changed. It spoke again, and the voice was a ruin. A low and guttural thing that gurgled in its throat. "I-K-N-O-W-Y-O-U-R-E-I-N-T-H. E-R-E." The wet tapping began again, faster now and frantic. With it came a thin and keening whine, a sound like wind through a crack in the world. And from the dark gap beneath the door, a black and viscous fluid began to seep into the room. It was thick as oil, and it carried the smell of the grave, of wet soil, and of things that rot in the earth. Leo moved. He crawled to the bed and pulled the blankets over him, and became a small and shuddering shape in the dim room. He had gone into his own darkness. On the other side of the door, the thing fell silent. I knew it was not gone. I knew that in my bones. It was there in the darkness beyond the door, and it was waiting. I kept my back to the far wall, and I watched the door. My breath was a small and panicked thing in my throat. On the bed, Leo was a trembling knot of blankets and fear. For me, this was a night's journey into that darkness. For him, it was the place he lived, a fool's curiosity which has been my ruin. More than once, warred with the terror, a need to see the shape of the thing that hunted us. A dreadful truth was better than not knowing. I went forward on my stockinged feet, and the old boards did not whisper. "Liam, no," came a voice from the bed, muffled by the cloth. Don't look." But I would look. I knelt upon the floor, and the reek of the grave was stronger. I lowered my head to the cold brass of the keyhole. At first there was only the dim hall and the moonlight that fell in a pale blade from the window at its end. Then it stepped into the narrow view. It was not a man, nor was it a beast. It was a thing that was built of sticks and of shadow, impossibly tall and thin. Its limbs were the limbs of a winter tree, and its body was a gyre of dust and night that had no true form. It wore his mother's floral apron, the cloth stretched over a hollow space where a chest should be. It wore his father's hunting cap set, upon a head that was only a clot of moving dark. It had no face, only void. In one of its twig-like hands, it held a picture I had seen on the wall, a portrait of the family. It held this picture before the void where its face should be, and it wore the smile of Leo's mother for its own. From its body it put forth a long and blackened twig of an arm, and it tapped upon the door. Thump, thump, thump. I threw myself back from the door and clapped a hand to my mouth to keep the gorge from rising. My mind could not hold the shape of what I had seen. This was no creature that had entered the house. This was the house itself, a parasite that wore the stolen keepsakes of the dead, or the soon-to-be dead for its raiment. From the door a new voice whispered, and the blood in me went to ice. "Liam, why are you hiding in there? Your mother is so worried about you." It was my own mother's voice, perfect. The voice she used when I was a child and sick with fever, the call to supper. From a life I would not see again. A wave of homesickness and of horror washed over me, for I wanted to be home, and I was not. And the thing in the hall gave a low chuckle that was the sound of dry leaves scuttling on a stone walk. It knew it had found the part of me that was soft. "Let me in, Liam," my mother's voice whispered, a sound of love and of poison. "I've come to take you home." I fell back to the wall and slid to the floor, and I felt the heat of shame in my thighs where my body had betrayed me. I looked at the trembling shape on the bed, the bottle he had offered. It had not been a joke. It had not been a rule, but a kindness, a tool for survival, for he knew all of it. The scraping began upon the door itself, a slow and patient sound, as of a claw being sharpened upon the wood. All the while it whispered my name in the voice of my mother, and it promised me an end to all this if I would but unlatch the door. The hours passed in that room, and the thing outside did not cease its siege. It spoke in the voices of the living, and of those I could not know, a gallery of ghosts at the door. It offered warmth and food. It promised an end to the long night, and all the while it scraped at the wood with a patience that was a madness to hear. The fear had burned away in me and left a hard and bitter anger. I was angry at the thing in the hall and at the people who had built for it a cage and called it a home. And I was angry at the boy who hid in his blankets and would not speak. Hours passed. "Leo," I said. My voice was a dry croak in my throat. "Leo, wake up." A shape stirred in the bed. He looked out from the pale fortress of his sheets, and his eyes were raw with fear. "Is it gone?" he whispered. Double quotes, "No, it's not gone," I said. "I need to know what this is, now. No more lies. What is that thing?" He flinched from the sound of my voice. He sat up in the bed and hugged his knees to his chest and would not look at me. "I don't know what it is," he mumbled to the door. "We just call it the Nightman. It's always been here, as long as my family has." The story came out. Of him then, a broken telling in the dark. His great-great-grandfather had built this house upon unhallowed ground, and from the first night there was a wrongness in the wood and in the walls. A bargain had been struck in that time, an unspoken covenant with the darkness. The family would have the house by the light of day, But from 9 until the dawn, the house was given over to that other. It gets lonely, Leo whispered. A tear cut a clean path through his face. It likes to play. It mimics people. It uses things it finds to try and make a body for itself. The apron, the hat, the picture. But it's getting bolder, he said, and his voice trembled in the small room. It used to just make noise. Now it tries to get in. The rules were enough before. Stay in your room. Don't look. Don't listen. But now it wants more. He finally met my eyes, and I saw in them a guilt as deep and as cold as a well. It wants someone new. A cold truth settled in my soul, and it wounded me. The sudden invite, the fear in his parents' eyes, the heavy bolt on the door. You brought me here for it. No, I didn't want to. The boy's voice broke. My parents, they said, it was getting too strong, that it wouldn't be satisfied with just them anymore. They said if it had someone new, someone not from the family, maybe it would be satisfied. Maybe it would leave us alone for a while. He had led me here as a lamb to the altar. His parents had not gone out. They were in this house, in their own locked room, and they were listening. They were praying that the beast in the hall would choose me. And then the scraping stopped. The whispers died. The house fell into a quiet so profound it was like the earth had stopped its turning. What's happening? I breathed. Leo's eyes grew wide. From the floor below, a new sound came. The sound of feet on the stairs, heavy, a footfall, and the dragging of a dead weight. Thump, drag, thump, drag. It was not trying to trick us. The game was done. The footsteps ceased outside our door. The silence held for a count of 3. Then a crack like thunder sounded as a great force struck the door. The wood splintered and the deadbolt shrieked in its housing crack. A web of breaks spidered from the lock. A fine dust of ruined wood fell to the floor. It's never done this before, Leo whimpered. He crawled away toward the dark corner of the room. It's never tried to break the door down. Crack, bang. The deadbolt was torn from the frame like a tooth from a jaw. The door swung inward on its hinges with a sad and final groan, and in the blackness of the hall I saw it. There was no void. It had filled itself. Its body was a terrible congress of things stolen from the house. Floorboards for shins and rusted pipes for arms. Its torso a twisted cage of stair banisters, and within that cage I saw my own duffel bag, and it pulsed like some dark and foreign heart. Its head was the grandfather clock from the hall. It leaned upon its neck of twisted wood, and the pendulum swung behind the glass face like a wild and frantic eye. From the clock a voice came, not one voice, but all of them, a discordant chorus speaking as one. T-I-M-E-I-S-U-P. The door swung open on its ruined hinges, and the thing assembled from the house's bones stepped into the room. Its coming was a grinding of parts, a clicking of old wood and metal, and the air filled with the smell of sawdust and the deep earth of the grave. Leo cried out, a sound of pure terror that was lost in the noise of the thing's advance. A hot and primal fear seized me, not of a predator, but of a thing that was wrong in the world. I took up a glass trophy from the desk, and I threw it with all the strength that I had. It struck the face of the grandfather clock, and the glass shattered in a spray of bright shards. The thing reeled back. It made a sound like all the clocks in the world striking some final and calamitous hour at once. It gave us a moment. The window, I screamed. I grabbed Leo by his arm and dragged him, for he was a thing of stone. My fingers were slick with sweat. and they slipped upon the window latch. It would not give. It had been painted into its frame. The thing righted itself. The broken glass of its face caught the moonlight in 1,000 crazed points of light. It came for us, its arm of rusted pipe raised up to strike. The bed. Help. Me with the bed, I yelled. Adrenaline found him at last, and he moved. We set our shoulders to the heavy oak bedstead and turned it onto its side and made of it a poor and flimsy barricade. The creature stumbled into the mattress, and its feet, made of chair legs and other things, became tangled in the sheets. It roared, and it began to tear the bed apart with its hands, ripping the guts of it out onto the floor. We were trapped in the corner of the room with the unyielding window at our backs. The sun, Leo gasped, and his eyes were wild. It's the only thing. It has to be inside before the sun comes up. I looked out into the night, and the sky was a deep and starless black. We did not have ours. The creature tore itself free of the ruined bed. It came on, slow now, for it knew that we were its own. It raised a hand made of silverware from the kitchen, the forks and the spoons bound together to make a shining and terrible claw. And then I saw a thing tucked behind his television. It was a high-powered flashlight. A last and desperate thought came to me. I lunged and took up the cold metal of the flashlight. The thing was upon me. I smelled the dust of its body, and I saw the brass pendulum swinging in its broken face. I found the switch, and a great pillar of white struck it full in its head. It shrieked, a sound of pure agony. The light did not burn it, but seemed to unmake it from itself. The spoons of its hand clattered to the floor. A floorboard on its leg split and fell away. The light was a poison to the thing's very being. It shielded the ruin of its face with its pipe arm, and it stumbled into the shadows by the door. And in that room began the longest watch of my life. I held the light like a sword, and the beam of it was the only thing that held the creature at bay. Leo huddled behind me and cried out when it scuttled at the edges of the room. We were keepers of a light against a great and pressing dark, and the strength in my arm burned away, and the batteries that fueled our light would not last. The creature would lunge, and I would drive it back with the beam, and we would wait and listen to it breathing in the shadows. The hours passed this way, in a stalemate between the light and the dark. The beam of the light began to fail. It flickered. It's dying, I gasped. Just a little longer, Leo urged, his eyes fixed upon the window. Just a little longer. The creature knew. It gathered itself in the dark as the beam dimmed to a sad yellow glow, and with a final and triumphant roar, it charged Dot in that same moment. A pale grey line was drawn upon the black horizon. It was the first sign of dawn. The thing struck me, and the flashlight was knocked from my hand. I was on the floor, and the monster stood over me, its clock face bent low, and I saw my own face reflected in the arc of the swinging pendulum. Then a single and pure ray of the morning sun pierced the window and touched the creature's back. It froze. A profound stillness came over it. Then it began to come apart. The clock head crumbled to a fine dust. The pipe arms fell from its shoulders and clattered on the floorboards. The banisters of its chest unwound. The stolen silver and the splintered wood and my own duffel bag all collapsed into a heap of simple things. In moments, all that was left was this pile of refuse and a thin layer of grey dust that smelled of the grave. The sun streamed through the window and filled the ruined room with light. I lay upon the floor and gasped for breath. Leo wept against the wall, a sound of relief and of terror. We had lived. There were footsteps in the hall, not of a monster, but of a man. The door to his parents' room opened, A moment later, they stood in our doorway. They did not look at the ruin of the room, nor at the pile of debris on the floor where the creature had been. They looked at me, and I saw on their faces not relief nor any gladness, but only a deep and bottomless disappointment. The horror was not ended. I knew then that the plan had failed. The sacrifice had not been made. The thing that was the house would be hungry when the sun fell again. I was the one who got away, and for this, they would never forgive me. Story 2 ends here. Now, we drift into story 3. I woke up to a stranger in my apartment. He says he lives here. I'm always so tired after going home. The fluorescent scream of the office lights still echoes behind my eyes, even here in the blessed dimness of the stairwell. I climb 3 flights, each step feeling like I'm dragging an anvil chained to my ankle. My key finds the lock on apartment 3B, my lock. The deadbolt thunks open. I shouldered the door in, smelling the faint, comforting ghost of last night's cheap instant noodles and the dusty warmth trapped inside. I don't even make it to the bedroom, the sagging, familiar embrace of my old couch. In the living room calls out. I sink into it, the springs groaning their familiar complaint beneath my weight. The fabric smells faintly of dust and me as sleep drags me under. A few hours later, I jolt awake in terror as a hand grabs my shoulder and shakes me violently. Hey, hey! Someone shouts Dot. I jerk awake, gasping, disoriented. Silver moonlight cuts the room into sharp shapes and deep pooling shadows. A man leans over me, his face gaunt with sweat in the gloom. His eyes are wide, wild marbles reflecting the weak light. Get up. What the hell are you doing in my apartment? His voice is a harsh rasp, cutting straight through whatever dream I was trapped in. Panic surges through me. I lurch upright heart, pounding, "You're what?" I blink hard, trying to steady my vision. No, this is my apartment. This is 3B. I live here. The man takes a step back, just enough to half merge with the shadows by the doorway. Are you out of your damn mind? I live in 3B. What are you even doing here? I don't know. Who you are, I say, trying to sound firm, authoritative, anything but panicked. But you need to leave before I call the police. Oh, I need to leave. That's rich. You broke into my place, and you're threatening me. I run a hand through my hair, eyes flicking to the hallway. Could I shove him out and lock the door? Could I grab my phone where is my phone, and call someone? I take a cautious step toward him, hands half raised. Look, I don't know what this is. Maybe you got the wrong floor or something. Or maybe you're confused, but this is my apartment, all right? You don't live here. He stares at me. Then, with sharp, jerking movements, he points toward the kitchenette. Oh yeah, then tell me that's your owl mug. I follow his finger. A chipped blue owl mug sits on the coffee table like a trap. I blink. That, I don't know. That's not mine. Damn right it's not, he snaps. That's my mug. And where's my sailboat painting? I had it right there. He jabs a finger toward the wall above the TV. Are you a thief? I turn. My faded Swiss Alps poster is gone. In its place, a garish print of a sailboat on water so blue it looks fake. Wait, I had a poster there. Mountains, Swiss Alps. I swear it was there. The man just stares at me, chest rising and falling fast. I hold up my hands like I'm warding off a wild animal. Okay, maybe I screwed up. My voice wavers half swallowed by the silence. Maybe I'm wrong. I must have come in the wrong door. I didn't mean to. Shit, I'm so sorry. I take a step back, knees weak. I'll go, all right. I'll just get my stuff and go. But something stops me. I glance back at the coffee table, at that blue owl mug. It's not just unfamiliar. It's wrong. The eyes aren't painted right. They're uneven. One stares forward. The other's cocked sideways, like it's watching the hallway behind me. The man hasn't moved. His expression has changed. Less angry now. More uncertain. His eyes flick from the wall to the table, to me. I don't. Remember this table being glass, he says quietly. I look down. The table's with bits. Always been wood. What are you talking about? I ask, but my voice is too soft to sound confrontational. No, it was glass, he mutters, round. Had a chip on the edge from when I dropped the takeout. This one's wood, square, and that lamp. He turns slowly. That's not my lamp. Something creaks in the bedroom. Neither of us moves. I think, he says, breath fogging lightly in the suddenly cold air, I think this isn't your apartment, or mine. The frantic anger is gone, replaced by a mirror of my own icy fear. Keys. He rasps, digging into his pocket with trembling fingers. He pulls out a keyring. We need to get out of here. We'll figure out what the hell's going on outside. My own keys are cold, heavy lumps in my hand. We don't speak again. The silence is a suffocating presence, thick with the smell of decay and the unnerving feeling of being watched by the very shadows that cling to the walls. The hallway to the door seems longer than it should be. I take a step, and the carpet squelches faintly beneath my foot. I glance down. The floor looks the same. Beige, ugly, a little stained. But now I don't trust it. Behind us, the bedroom door creaks again, only this time it doesn't stop. It opens slowly, with the hush of breath sliding between teeth. He doesn't turn. Neither do I. Don't look back, he whispers. His voice shakes. Just walk. We move, inching forward. Every object in the living room seems shifted. The couch leans ever so slightly toward the wall. Cushions caved in like something heavy just rose from them. The bookshelf is missing. A shelf my hand tightens around the keyring. The keys rattle too loudly, like they're trying to call attention to us. Like they want something else to hear. We're almost there, I murmur, not sure who I'm trying to reassure, him or myself. The front door is 10 feet away, 8. A soft knock echoes from inside the bedroom. The man beside me flinches. I don't dare look. The temperature drops. My breath fogs the air, hangs there, then drifts backward against the laws of physics. I choke on it. This place, this thing, it's copying us, badly. The front door looms closer now, but the handle seems off, longer than I remember. He reaches the door first, his hand trembling violently as he tries to jam his key into the deadbolt. It scrapes uselessly against the plate. It won't fit. Panic edges back into his voice. It should just unlock from inside. I hiss, my hand closing over the cold knob. I twist, it turns freely. Thank God. With a surge of desperate hope, I yank the door open. We stumble out together into the hallway, gasping lungfuls of stagnant, unmoving air. It tastes thick with dust and that same underlying damp decay. The hallway light fixture is shattered, glass. Shards glittering dully on the floor below. Weak, grey pre-dawn light filters from a grimy window at the far end, revealing a scene that stops us dead. The hallway is a ruin, Wallpaper hangs in long, mouldering strips, revealing crumbling plaster. Underneath, the carpet is threadbare, stained with dark, unidentifiable patches, pulled up in places to show warped floorboards. Doors to other apartments hang askew on broken hinges, revealing glimpses of darkness within. Cobwebs thick as gauze drape the corners and ceiling. The air is frigid, smelling overwhelmingly of damp rot, mildew, and neglect. Utter, absolute desolation. This, the man beside me whispers, his voice cracking. This building, it's condemned. Look. He points a shaking finger towards a large official notice, nailed crookedly to the wall opposite my door. Our door. Apartment 3B. The notice is faded, water-stained. But the bold red letters are unmistakable. Condemned. Structurally unsound. Entry prohibited. My blood turns to ice. We both slowly turn to look back at the door we just emerged from. Apartment 3B. The wood is warped. The paint blistered and peeling. A thick layer of grime coats the surface, thick as old moss. The number 3B eyes barely visible beneath it, the brass digits green with corrosion. The keyhole looks rusted shut. It looks like it hasn't been opened in years. The man raises his hand, slowly, like lifting the key costs him something. I look, down at mine, both identical, both for 3B, both seemingly useless against the decayed reality before us. Yet they worked moments ago. He meets my eyes. Our keys hang limp in our hands. The only sound is the frantic hammering of our hearts and the silence. And then the shadows behind the door shift. At first, I almost miss it. Just a flicker of movement in the dark. A smudge of black deeper than the shadows. But then it pushes. Forward, slow and deliberate. It isn't a person. Not quite. The shape doesn't hold together right. Limbs bend where they shouldn't. Joints jutting at broken angles. Where a face should be, there's only a hollowed-out suggestion of one. Like a mask left too close to a flame. And the worst part, the hallway isn't big enough for it. The ceiling should scrape its skull. The walls should press against its shoulders. But it keeps coming anyway, folding itself into the space like it's bending the apartment around it. The shape tilts its head. My ribs clamp tight, breath trapped like a live thing in my throat. The man beside me makes a sound, not quite a whimper, maybe a prayer. A wet crack splits the silence. The doorframe splinters, just a hairline fracture, but it sounds like a gunshot in the still air. We run, stairs blur underfoot. We don't stop. Until concrete turns to asphalt, until the sky bleeds dawn. Our eyes meet, a silent scream passing between us. My stomach drops as reality rearranges itself in my mind. This isn't right. The street signs are unfamiliar. The buildings wear strange colors, and that terrible, clawing realization. I don't live in an apartment. I own a house. A blue colonial with hydrangeas out front. A mailbox with mine and Olivia's names painted on the side. A garage where my daughter's bike leans against the wall. Cold sweat trickles down my back. How did we get inside that place? Who let us in? But the most chilling question lingers between us, unspoken. What in God's name did we just escape from? Story 3 ends here, now. Listen closely to Story 4. Mr. Halpin told us not to open the door after 11 p.m. I didn't listen. When I opened the door after 11, I expected a teacher yelling, not a barefoot boy with a trembling smile telling me, it's already inside. It started like any other day. Paul, Chris and I went to school together as usual. We were in 10th grade at the time, and we were childhood friends. So we knew everything about each other. The second we stepped inside, the energy was off. Everyone was buzzing, laughing. Whispering, we saw the sign on the board outside our classroom. Stillgrove trip. 3 days pack. White CLOTH. The principal. And our math teacher, Mr. Halpin, grinned as he announced it to us. "Good, OL Stillgrove," he said. "You blink, and you miss the whole town. Our class," he continued, "because of that stupid science contest we won last year, has been gifted a 3-day vacation in a Stillgrove hotel. All expenses paid. You leave tomorrow morning." I won't lie, I was thrilled. Paul was already calculating how many snacks he could bring. Chris and his girlfriend Mia couldn't stop talking about it. Stillgrove, we'd barely heard of it. Just a smudge on a map. But that made it better, somehow. More mysterious. Sometimes mystery beats knowing. Tomorrow, you will wear festive white and get straight on the bus. Mr. Halpin continued, "We'll all have fun. You will not forget it," he was right. I'll never forget that trip. The next morning, we heard the wheels of the bus pulling up in front of the school, hissing to a stop. The bus driver waited, silent, as we boarded. We threw our bags into the trunk, phones in our pockets, snacks in hand. Paul brought 10 different kinds. Of course, he sat next to me, holding that weird peach soda he's been obsessed with since we were 9. And Chris sat with Mia, laughing and enjoying every moment. "Still think it tastes like radioactive syrup," I said. He just smiled. "Yeah, well, worth it." There were supposed to be at least 3 teachers on this trip. There were 2. Mrs. Bell sat at the front, half asleep behind sunglasses, and Mr. Halpin, he didn't sit. He stood almost the whole ride. He stood. After about an hour and a half, he finally turned around. "Students," he said, "look sharp. We've arrived in Stillgrove." I pressed my face to the window. It was beautiful. The trees, the colors, the birds. Stunning. But as we passed the town's sign, "Welcome to Stillgrove," something twisted in my stomach. It looked older than it should have been. The paint was chipped, and one of the letters was hanging loose. Then I saw him, an old man, standing perfectly still on the sidewalk just before the square, dressed head to toe in black. Heavy coat, no hat, not moving, just standing perfectly, still with his back to us. As we passed, he lifted one hand slowly and pointed at our bus, not waving, just pointing. Then he mouthed words I couldn't quite catch. I blinked. When I looked again, he was gone. I looked around, but no one else reacted. Even the bus driver didn't seem to notice. I turned back toward Chris and Mia. I saw Mia quietly resting her head on Chris's shoulder. He didn't say anything, just placed his hand on hers and kept looking out the window. I'd never seen them that still before. It felt ... soft, and somehow too soft for this place. The doors wheezed open. We stepped out onto Stillgrove, the hotel. The halcyon hollow, as the crooked wooden sign read, was waiting for us at the end of the street. From the outside, it looked normal, big, rectangular, rows of windows, all sealed shut. Not a single curtain moved. Inside, the air changed. The lobby smelled faintly of dust and something sweet, like rotten fruit. One man stood behind the reception desk. He wore a red suit and a matching hat. His beard was long, snow white, and neatly combed. He smiled, ... wide, too wide. Something about him felt wrong. Not dangerous, just ... off. Mr. Halpin spoke to him. Quietly, eyes lowered, like they knew each other. There will be 2 students in each room, he told us afterward. No less, no more. Paul and I exchanged a look. Of course, we'd room together. And one more thing, Mr. Halpin said. His voice was calm, but strict. After 11 p.m., no phones, no noise, no leaving the hotel, and do not open the door. Paul leaned over and whispered, "Why is it called the Halcyon Hollow anyway? Sounds like a funeral home." I didn't answer. I was too busy trying to ignore the smell in the air. That sweet, rotting scent again. We all nodded. Room 35 was small but decent. 2 beds, 1 bathroom, a large window overlooking the woods. Chris and Mia were next door in room 37. Mia was brushing her hair, humming a soft tune. I remember the way she talked about her little brother once, how she used to sneak out at night to watch the stars with him. She said those nights were the only time she felt truly free. It seemed like a lifetime ago. Paul tossed his backpack. He frowned. "Is it just me?" he muttered. "Or does this bed look like someone already slept in it?" I looked. The pillow was slightly dented. The sheet creased at the edge. Already with the paranoid thoughts, I teased. He didn't answer, just yawned. "It's late. I'm dead tired," he said. Same. At 11:30 p.m., we turned off the lights and lay our heads on the pillows. That's when the nightmare began. Around 3 a.m., I opened my eyes. Something felt ... wrong. Paul was snoring softly. The room was quiet. Too quiet. Then I noticed the curtains moving slightly, not from wind, from light. I sat up and looked outside. He was there, the receptionist. The one with the red suit and the too wide smile was standing on a small hill outside our window. My heart thumped. He was standing still, his red suit catching the moonlight. Too sharp, too precise. Then knock, 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 whipped my head around. The door, no one else moved. Dead silence. "Paul," I whispered, still asleep. Heart racing, I stood and crept to the door. Slowly, I opened it. Someone was standing in the hallway. Not the man in red, a boy. He stood with his back to me, his head lowered, arms limp at his sides. He was barefoot. My mouth was dry. "Hey," I whispered. No answer. Then he turned his head just slightly, not all the way. Just enough for me to see a wide, trembling smile forming on his cheek. "You saw him, didn't you?" he whispered. "No." "He's inside. Good luck." I was shaking with fear, unable to explain what I experienced. After a few seconds, I gathered my courage and closed the door. Scared, I went back to the window and the man was gone, chilled. I went back to bed, 8 a.m. Paul woke me up. "I slept like a baby," he said, and stretched. "Yeah, ... me too." I didn't talk about it, not even with Paul. I would sound crazy, but I knew ... that what I saw was not a strange dream. It was real, but something told me I wouldn't be able to keep it to myself for long. Not in Still Grove. Mr. Halpin told everyone to come to breakfast at the hotel restaurant. Paul, Chris, Mia, and I walked together. Everyone was talking, but I was silent. As we sat at the table, I noticed that Mia was combing her hair for 2. Chris noticed it too, and whispered something to her. She stopped. I looked at Chris's eyes, and ... he looked tired. "Chris, did you sleep well?" And he said in a deep voice, "Why won't I sleep well?" He was lying, it was obvious. But I didn't say a word about it. As we finished breakfast, Mr. Halpin stood at the front of the restaurant and clapped his hands once, hard. Today, each pair will get a paper map of the area. You're free to explore the town. Respectfully, you'll be back by 6 p.m. for dinner. Some students applauded. Most did not. I saw smiles, but almost all of them were forced. When Paul and I headed out, I asked him if he'd noticed anything weird. He shrugged. I mean, Mia was brushing her hair for like 25 minutes straight, he said. Jokingly, we walked down one of the narrow alleys behind the hotel. The sun was out, and yet everything felt grey, like the colour had been sucked out of the place. I carved into one of the wooden fence posts at the alley's end, barely visible under a layer of grime. Then I saw it. He smiles to enter. What? Paul said behind me. I pointed at the carving, but when he leaned in to look, the words were gone. Never mind. Looks like there's a large shopping mall on the map. Want to check out what's there? Paul smiled. Yeah, but you know, you pay. You owe me since 3rd grade, and I laughed. It didn't seem far, at least according to the map, or so I thought. Because the map was wrong, completely. It led us to a dark, abandoned place. An alley, no lights, no one. The smell was of blood and dirt. The wind was sharp. It didn't feel natural. Let's get out of here, Paul said, but I felt the place calling me, as if it was forbidden to turn around, only to move forward. Then I noticed something from the shadows. It was moving towards us. Slowly, step by step, I saw his face. My body turned to ice. It was Mr. Halpin. Let's get out of here, Paul shouted. I nodded, finally. Something in my chest tightened. We turned around to leave, retracing our steps back through the alley. That's when we heard it. A soft, wet sound, like something falling onto the ground. Paul stopped walking. You heard that right. Yeah, I whispered. We turned back slowly. There, near the edge of the alley, just a few feet from where we'd stood moments before. Mia's body, it was crumpled, like someone had dropped her from above. Her limbs were bent in wrong directions. Her hair was fanned across the filthy ground, and her white clothes were stained dark red dot. Paul let out a noise I'd never heard him make before. Not a scream, just broken breath. I staggered forward. My mind refused to accept what I was seeing. Her face, God, it was Mia. I dropped to my knees beside her, hands shaking. Her skin was cold, and in her hand was her phone. The screen was on. She had been recording a voice memo. I pressed play, and what I heard shocked me. Chris, ... No, that. Chris, no, that's not him, God. It's smiling with his face. Don't trust it, I cried. So did Paul, but not for long. ... I raised my head. Mr. Halpin got closer to us, shaking the earth. Paul and I ran as fast as we could, shocked by what we saw. Each step hurt more than the last. We were moving towards a small hill, and suddenly Paul tripped and fell. I turned back, ... and I didn't see Mr. Halpin. I helped Paul get up. He is not here, I said as I struggled to breath. You sure I don't want to... Paul stopped his words. Paul, hey, Paul, I shouted, but Paul didn't answer. He just stood frozen, eyes wide and glassy. Then, from the shadows behind us, a voice cut through the silence. Low, calm, but chilling. Hey there, I spun around, and there stood Chris. His eyes were dark, But his smile, it wasn't his smile. It was too wide, too still, like something else wearing his face. "Chris," I whispered, barely recognizing the thing wearing his skin. He tilted his head. "You think I don't remember? I watched it too, through your eyes and hers." And Paul's his smile widened unnaturally. "They always send me with the new ones. It's easier when I'm already inside." He took a step forward. Paul and I stepped back, our feet crunching in the dry grass. "Chris," I said, my throat dry, if this is some kind of a sick joke, but he wasn't listening. His eyes weren't. His face looked like Chris, ... But the expression was wrong. Suddenly, THWACK, a blur from the left, the sound of steel cracking bone. Chris dropped like a rag doll. Behind him stood Mr. Halpin. His face was blank, his shirt soaked with blood, and both hands gripped a fire axe, the blade buried in what used to be Chris's skull. Paul screamed. I couldn't. I was motionless. Chris's body jerked once, then went still. Mr. Halpin didn't say a word at first. He pulled the axe free in one motion, breathing hard. Then he turned to us, his expression still flat, unreadable. "That wasn't your friend," he said coldly. "Your friend died last night. I buried what was left." He looked down at the twitching, headless body. "You were talking to something wearing his skin." Paul stumbled back. "You're insane. You killed. I saved you," Mr. Halpin snapped. Then he looked at me, something deep in his eyes. Exhaustion. Regret. Fear. Stillgrove lets them in when someone opens the door. All it takes is one knock, ... and one invitation. He pointed at me. "You opened it, didn't you?" I wanted to deny it. I wanted to run. But I remembered that whisper. "You saw him, didn't you? Now he's inside, but then ... Mr. Halpin smiled. And in that smile, I saw it, the end of something. Or maybe the beginning. I don't know who else saw it. If you've been to Stillgrove, please tell me I'm not alone. Story 4 ends here and now. We enter the fog of Story 5. There's a valley where no one returns, and I know why. This happened back in 2009, but I never talked about it until now. Not with my VA group, not even with my wife. I buried it deep, same as the army buried the report. But lately, I've been waking up in cold sweats, again always, smelling the same thing, burnt skin. I think it's time I put it down somewhere, just once. Name's John Byrne, by the way. Born in Dorchester, raised with a chip on my shoulder and a Red Sox cap I wore into the Hindu Kush. But that was a long time ago. I was a radio guy with 2nd Battalion, 12th Infantry 4th Brigade Combat Team, 4th IDS stationed out of Fob Blessing, Puna Province, Afghanistan. That place was a bitch. Nothing but jagged mountains, washed out goat trails barely wide enough for a Humvee. Our AO ran deep into the valleys, where trucks couldn't go and even MRAPs had to stop. We humped it mostly on foot, full gear, sweating under that dry ass. Afghan sun. You ever try climbing shale in 100-degree heat with 60 pounds on your back and no air? That was the job. Nights dropped cold enough to see your breath. But the days, man, the days were just dust, heat, and wondering if today was the day you get your ass blown off. I was an RTO radio telephone operator for 2nd Platoon, Bravo, Company. I carried the radio, logged comms, and kept my mouth shut. I had just enough rank to carry responsibility, but not enough to question orders. That radio was my lifeline and my leash. Anyway, there's one patrol I can't stop replaying. Not because of bullets or mortar, but because of what I saw, and what I didn't stop. We called it Village 41. That's what was scrawled on the laminated map, duct taped inside the Humvee. Half these places didn't have real names, or if they did, no one outside the AO could pronounce them. Village 41 sat high near the Pakistan border, in a narrow valley choked with dust and dry brush. Intel said it was a Hague waypoint. That's Hezb Islami Galbuddin, one of the smaller shitbag factions fighting us and the Afghan government. Not as flashy as the Taliban, but they had a few kills to their name. S2 said fighters used the route to stash weapons, slip across the border, maybe rack out for a night. Probably just a grid someone circled in the talk. We stepped off late afternoon. That was June 11th. Sun was dropping, but the heat was still brutal. Everything smelled like sweat, cordite, and hot nylon. No MRAP could make that incline, so we hummed. It, just us, sweat, and rock. My calves were screaming. Plate carrier dug into my collarbone. Every step kicked up grit. We passed the remains of a Russian fighting position, a pile of rusted shell casings, and a half-buried metal box with Cyrillic on the side. Nobody said anything, but everyone glanced at it, like a grave marker. No one talked, just the usual noise gear. Clinking, boots scraping rocks, someone clearing their throat. My radio beeped through the headset, heartbeat steady. LT Summers was up front. Staff Sergeant Hudson paced like a caged dog. Then crack, high sharp 7.62. By the sound of it, contact, right side. Contact. 3 o'clock. Someone yelled. The squad scattered like dropped gear. Hudson was already barking. Return fire. Push right. Now. Rounds started kicking up dirt and rock. RPK, maybe an old PK, indistinct thump thump thump, echoing off the ridge.spc. Chang went down, took one to the neck. He dropped like a sack. Tried to gurgle something, but it was just blood. Red froth bubbling in the dust. Doc was on him fast, but it didn't matter. We all saw it. Chang was 22, born in Flushing, Queens. He had this dumb Yankees hat he pinned up in his bunk just to fuck with me, but he didn't care. I still remember the last thing he said to me. You think they got mango rippets at the cop? I'll bet you $10 they do. Then he laughed. That was 5 minutes before his throat opened up like wet paper. Then he was gone. I hit the deck. Keyed the mic. Blackjack actual. This is 2-1, Romeo troops in contact. Grid to follow. Break. 1 Kia, requesting immediate support. Over. Then a crackle. 2-1 Romeo. This is Blackjack actual. Send grid. What is your sit-trup over? Hudson was already beside me, ripping the mic from my hand. Break Blackjack actual. This is 1-6. Grid Sierra Foxtrot 1582 7-4-6-9.I. Say again 1582 7-4-6-9. Multiple rounds from elevated. Position tree line to our east. I got a man down. Kia. Break. Sweeping to engage and secure nearby compounds. Over. The net was quiet a moment. Then came the reply. Solid copy. 1-6. ISR unavailable. Nearest QRF element to clicks. South ETA 30 mics. Acknowledge. Roger. That. We'll handle it. Out. Hudson dropped the mic, gritting his teeth. Eyes scanning the ridge. 2 and 3. Push east. I want suppressing fire on that tree line right fucking now. Rounds cracked overhead. I heard the pop of M4 South. and the ripping brut of Santiago's saw opening up. Red, peel right, flank M, white team hold base of fire, get that. 203 up put around behind those rocks. Harlow knelt beside me, thumbing his M203, launching a thunk I can still hear right now. Seconds later, a hump and dust kicked up where the grenade landed. Hudson was barking again. Peel and fire. Bound by buddy team. Move with fucking purpose. PFC Knox and Franks pushed forward in a low crouch, firing short bursts tapped up as the rest of us laid down suppressive. They ducked behind a broken wall. Next pair moved. Shift fire 5 meters right. Their moving eyes on muzzle flash behind that shale outcrop. Saw gunner, adjust fire. Talk your rounds in. You're going high, lower to mills. Santiago grunted, shifted his barrel. The saw hammered. Again long bursts. Brass poured out. RTO, you tracking this. Log all contacts. Mark grid. And tell command we're bounding through the compound clearing as we go. I was already jotting the time 1938 local, my fingers shaking as I flipped through the Sincar's net. After 5, maybe 10 minutes, it was quiet again, ears ringing, smell of cordite and copper in the air. Classic Afghan ghost, contact hit, run, disappear, smoke and shadows. Never even saw the shooters. Maybe 3 guys, max, just harassing fire. Hudson was pacing, breathing hard. He stared at Chang's body for a long time, but said nothing. Staff Sergeant Mark Hudson led first squad. He didn't believe in hesitation. His motto was, get in, sweep, secure, get the fuck out. ROEs were flexible. Hudson wrote the fine print. After we secured Chang's body for Kasavac, we regrouped along the ridge, pulling security while Hudson mapped out the sweep. Nobody said much. Just that heavy silence that settles after someone goes down. We hit the ridge as the sun was starting to dip. The village lay below, dead quiet. Mud walls, tin roofs, a few terraces hacked into the hillside. Not a soul in sight. No smoke from chimneys, no dogs barking. We stacked on the largest compound low stone walls, cracked gate. We entered. The compound per Sop Hudson had a stack along the outer wall too, up front with him, me and the Terp hanging back. No shots fired, no resistance. He didn't bother with a not jest, kicked the gate in. First structure was a Turum clay brick shack. Inside, 5 civilians, 3 kids, 2 adult women, no men. We cleared the rooms, rifles up, by the book. Canted muzzle through the doorway, pie the corners, sweep left to right. No weapons, no comms gear, no signs of HIG. Hudson barked, set security, search the inside. Specialist Rowan was posted at the door. Cantu and Harlow started flipping mats, checking jugs for false bottoms. I followed the Terp over to the women, per row. Only our Terp could ask questions, directly unless the detainees were armed or hostile. But Hudson didn't give shit about that. He grabbed one of the women by the wrist. She looked barely 20, screamed something in Shesht. The Terp stepped forward, trying to defuse. She says her husband's gone to the fields with the goats. Not a fighter, just family. Yeah, Hudson said. Then she won't mind if we check the house. He shoved her aside and stepped into the next room. There was a makeshift cradle in the corner. It was empty, no sign of any weapons cache. We didn't find any no ammo tins, no radio batteries, just a plastic tea set and a prayer rug. Then Hudson did something that stopped me cold. He took out a small photo taped to the wall just Picture of some bearded man holding a baby and burned it with his lighter, right there in front of the family. The kids started crying. The woman just sat down hard and covered her head with her scarf. Hudson turned to the Ask her where they're hiding the shit. Now, she says there's nothing, Sergeant. Hudson leaned down, close enough to whisper, Tell her if she lies again, I'll shoot the fucking goat first. Then the oldest boy, Sergeant. The Terp protested, but Hudson cut him off. Translate it. The Terp stood still. I saw his hands shaking. Translate it, or I'll find someone who will. That was when I stepped outside and lit a cigarette. I just didn't want to be inside anymore. Outside, the sun was still brutal. Another squad had rounded up for military age males too. Of them teens, maybe 16. One was wearing blue sandals and a white tunic that looked like it hadn't been washed in a month. The other was older, maybe 20, and walked with a crutch. PFC Knox had them lined up on their knees, zip-tied. One of them had a bloody lip already. Franks was pacing behind them with his M4, cigarette hanging from his mouth. Hudson came out a few minutes later, nodding to Franks. You too, he said, pointing. Get the cripple and the tall one up. Walk 'em over behind the wall. I watched them go. Looking back, I knew what was coming, but I didn't think it at the time. Or maybe because things were just happening so fast. I don't know. But maybe 30 seconds later, I heard 2 shots. Just 2 muffled cracks behind the compound wall. I didn't ask. Me and Santiago looked at each other, but we didn't say anything. Franks came back, wiping his hands on his trousers like he'd just finished a field dressing drill. He didn't look at anyone, just lit another cigarette. Hudson stepped past me, calm as ever. Next house, he said. Move. We swept through 3 more compounds. They were all the same dusty floors, stale flatbread, scared faces, and no weapons. Just men and women trying not to make eye contact, trying to disappear at the 4th house. Cantu kicked open a storeroom and found a crate of old Soviet shells. Rusted 82mm mortar that looked like they'd been sitting since the Mujahideen days. Might have been inoperable. Might have been planted. It didn't matter. Hudson called it a weapons cache and gave the order. Demo the whole structure. Then, pull the mails for SSE. SSE, sensitive site exploitation. Supposed to mean bagging documents, biometrics, photos. Instead, Knox and Franks dragged 3 men out into the courtyard. One was screaming that he was a lutetia, another was coughing blood after a boot to the ribs. The third just stared straight ahead, not blinking. I started a line 6 in my notebook. Staff Sergeant, you want these logged? He looked at me. They'll never make it to battalion. Mark it as cleared. No occupants. That was the moment something cracked for me. I didn't say anything. Just wrote the grid and left the name blank. The worst came at the final houser. Squat mud brick home with a tarp nailed across the doorway. I was on comes, holding rear security with Santiago, but I could hear everything. Room clear, Knox called. Then 2 males, unarmed. Hudson entered and I followed a few seconds later. One of them was just a kid, maybe 17. Wiry couldn't have weighed more than 120 soaking wet. He was shaking, hands zip-tied behind his back. The other was older, probably mid-40s, missing. His right leg below the knee. He sat propped against the wall, breathing hard. Neither had so much as a fucking screwdriver on them. Hudson motioned to the Terp. What are they saying? The Terp looked uneasy. Older man says he's the uncle. Says he hates Taliban. Says Taliban killed son last year for helping Americans. Hudson knelt down next to the kid. You ever plant an IED? The kid just shook his head. I don't think he even understood the question. Then Hudson turned to the Terp. Ask him. The Terp repeated it. He got the same terrified shake of the head. Then Hudson asked something in English. The Terp didn't bother translating. Where's the fucking cash? At that point, Hudson stood up, pulled his M9 from its holster, aimed down and shot the older guy point blank in the face. Just like that. No warning. The pop echoed off the walls like slamming a door. I fucking swear I can still hear the ringing in my ear. Blood sprayed the wall. The guy's body slumped sideways like someone yanked a puppet string. The kid starts screaming, and Hudson pistol whipped him to shut him up. The Terp snapped. He started yelling at Hudson in Pashto. I couldn't understand what he was saying. Hudson pointed his pistol at the Terp, and that seemed to settle him down, but Hudson kept his weapon pointed at the Terp's head. I don't know what came over me, but for some reason I stepped in front of the Terp and grabbed his arm. Stop, I said. That's enough. Hudson glared at me. For a second, I thought he was going to shoot me too, but he holstered his weapon and walked out. My hand hovered over the radio, but I didn't keep a mic. I remember thinking that's some seriously fucked up shit. I glanced at my watch. 1926 local. Wrote it in my log. Out of habit. After the last building was cleared, Hudson gave the order. Demo, burn it. I didn't say anything. I just helped wire the charges. We lit the fires. Smoke rose fast. Black, choking, oily. There was something else in it, something heavy, chemical, almost sweet. Like burning rubber and hair. I couldn't scrub it off. Couldn't get it out of my nose. I swear I still smell it on my skin sometimes. In my sweat, in the threads of my old gear I can't throw away. Even now, sometimes when I wake up in the middle of the night, I swear I can still smell it. No one said anything to each other when we hiked down that hill. 7 dead. No report filed. Next morning, I asked LT Summers about it. He didn't look up from his notebook. Village 41 was empty when we arrived. That's what goes in the log. Understood. I nodded. We never spoke of it again. 2 years later, I was out of the army. I didn't re-enlist. I couldn't wear the uniform again. I took some college courses, but nothing panned out. Bounced from one job to another. I started drinking heavy for a while, until I woke up one morning on the kitchen floor with my M9 next to me and a dry cigarette taste in my throat. I never pulled the trigger, but I chambered around. That was enough. I went to Jamaica Plain VA Medical Center in Boston. Thought maybe I'd talk to someone. Instead, I spent 5 hours in a waiting room with a clipboard and some bored civilian behind glass telling me they could probably get me in by November. It was June when I finally saw a Geisam contractor, not even a doctor. You ever experienced a high-stress event you felt unprepared for in a professional capacity? I almost laughed. They gave me a packet, a referral to group therapy in a strip mall, and a warning not to mix meds with alcohol. I left the packet on the seat of my truck and never looked at it again. While sitting on my couch one evening, eating pizza, scrolling my laptop, I noticed that someone shared a link to Army Times. Los Angeles, California soldier awarded Bronze Star for valor in Iraq. It was Hudson, de la Province. Convoy ambush. He'd led a counterattack. Pulled a wounded driver out of a burning Humvee. Pictures showed him clean-shaven, medals squared away. They called him an example of leadership under fire. I stared at his picture for a while, then I closed the laptop. The man who earned that medal wasn't the one I remember. I remember Village 41 and the smell that still sticks to me like burned skin, and the blood that didn't dry until long after we left that valley behind. We don't talk about what happened in Village 41, but we should. Story 5 ends here. Now, settle in for Story 6. Night shift at the Evergrove Market. Day 1, my first shift at the Evergrove Market, started with a paper sign. Hiring, night shift needed. Evergrove Market, the sign slapped against the glass door in the wind bold. Blocky letters that caught my eye mid-jog. I wasn't out for exercise. I was trying to outrun the weight pressing on my chest, overdue rent, climbing student loans, and the hollow thud of every "we regret to inform you" that kept piling into my inbox. I had a degree, engineering no less, supposed to be a golden ticket instead. It brought me rejection emails and an annoying sense of failure. But what stopped me cold was the pay. $55 per hour. I blinked, wondering if I'd read it wrong. No experience required. Night shift. Immediate start. It sounded too good to be true, which usually meant it was. But I stood there, heart racing, rereading it like the words might disappear if I looked away. My bank account had dipped below 3 days ago. I'd been living on canned soup and pride. I looked down at the bottom of the flyer and read the address aloud under my breath. 3921 Old Pine Road, California. I sighed. Newtown, no family, no friends, just me, chasing some kind of fresh start in a place that didn't know my name. It wasn't ideal, but it was something, a flicker of hope. A paycheck by 10 p.m. I was there. The store wasn't anything spectacular. In fact, it was a lot smaller than I'd imagined. I don't know why I thought this would be. Like a giant Walmart, I muttered to myself, taking in the dim flickering sign saying Evergrove and the eerie silence around me. There were no other shops in sight. Just a lone building squatting on the side of a near-empty highway, swallowed by darkness on all sides. It felt more like a rest stop for ghosts than a convenience store. But I stepped forward anyway. As a woman, I knew the risk of walking into sketchy places alone. Every instinct told me to turn around. But when you're desperate, even the strangest places can start to look like second chances. The bell above the door gave a hollow jingle as I walked. In the store was dimly lit aisles, stretching ahead like crooked teeth in a too-wide grin. The reception counter was empty, and the cold hit me like a slap dot. Freezing dot, why was it so cold in the middle of July? I rubbed my arms, breath fogging slightly as I looked around. That's when I heard the soft shuffle of footsteps, followed by a creak. Someone stepped out from the furthest aisle, his presence sudden and uncanny. A grizzled man with deep lines etched into his face like cracked leather. "What do you want?" he grunted, voice gravelly and dry. I saw a sign. You guys hiring?" He stared at me too long. Long enough to make me question if I'd said anything at all. Then he gave a slow nod and turned his back. "Follow me," he said, already turning down the narrow hallway. "Hope you're not scared of staying alone. I've done night shifts before," Vi said, recalling the call center night shift in high school, then retail during college. I was used to night shifts. They kept me away from home, from shouting matches, from silence I didn't know how to fill. The old man moved faster than I expected, his steps brisk and sure, like he didn't have time to waste. "This isn't your average night shift," he muttered, glancing back at me with a look I couldn't quite read, like he was sizing me up, or reconsidering something. We reached a cramped employee office tucked behind a heavy door. He rummaged through a drawer, pulled out a clipboard, and slapped a yellowed form onto the desk. "Fill this out," he said, sliding the clipboard toward me. "If you're good to start, the shift begins tonight." He paused just long enough that I wondered if he was waiting for me to back out, but I didn't. I picked up the pen and skimmed the contract, the paper cold and stiff beneath my fingers. One line snagged my attention like a fishhook: minimum term. 1 year, no early termination. Maybe they didn't want employees quitting after making a decent paycheck. Still, something about it felt off. My rent and student loans weighed heavily on my mind. Beggars can't be choosers, and I would need at least 6 months of steady work just to get a handle on my debts. But the moment my pen hit the paper, I felt a chill not from the air, but from the room, like the store itself was watching me. The old man didn't smile or nod welcomingly, just gave me a slow, unreadable nod. Without a word, he took the form and slid it into a filing cabinet that looked like it hadn't been opened in decades. "You'll be alone most of the time," he said, locking the drawer with a sharp click. "Stock shelves. Watch the front if anyone shows up. The cameras are old, but they work. And read this." He handed me a laminated sheet of yellow paper. The title read, "Standard Protocols." I unfolded the sheet carefully, the plastic sticky against my fingers. The list was typed in faded black letters. Standard Protocols: 1. Never enter the basement. 2. If you hear footsteps or whispers after midnight, do not respond or investigate. 3. Keep all exterior doors, except the front door, locked at all times. No exceptions. For do not acknowledge or engage with any visitors after 2 a.m. They are not here for the store. 5. If the lights flicker more than twice in a minute, stop all work immediately and hide until 1 a.m. 6. Do not exit the premises during your scheduled shift unless explicitly authorized. 7. Do not use your phone to call anyone inside the store signals. Get scrambled. 8. If you feel watched, do not turn around or run. Walk calmly to the main office and lock the door until you hear footsteps. Walk away. 9. Under no circumstances, touch the old cash register drawer at the front counter. 10. If the emergency alarm sounds, cease all tasks immediately and remain still. Do not speak. Do not move until the sound stops. And ignore the voice that speaks. I swallowed hard, eyes flicking back up to the old man. "Serious business," I said, sarcasm creeping into my voice. "What is this? A hazing ritual?" He didn't laugh, didn't even blink. "If you want to live," he said quietly, locking eyes with me, "then follow the rules." With that, he turned and left the office, glancing at his watch. "Your shift starts at 11 and ends at 6. Uniforms in the back," he added casually, as if he hadn't just threatened my life. I stood alone in the cold, empty store, the silence pressing down on me. The clock on the wall ticked loudly. 10:30 p.m. Only 30 minutes until I had to fully commit to whatever this place was. I headed toward the back room, the fluorescent lights buzzing overhead. The narrow hallway smelled faintly of old wood and something metallic I couldn't place. When I found the uniform hanging on a rusty hook, I was relieved to see a thick jacket along with the usual store polo and pants. Slipping into the jacket, I felt a small spark of comfort, like armor against the unknown. But the uneasy feeling didn't leave. The protocols, The warning, the way the old man looked at me, none of it added up to a normal night shift. I checked the clock again. Jam spoolelo at 5 PM. Time to face the night. The first hour passed quietly. Just me, the distant hum of the overhead lights, and the occasional whoosh of cars speeding down the highway. Outside, none of them stopping. They never did. Not here. I stocked shelves like I was supposed to. The aisles were narrow and dim, and the inventory was strange. Too much of one thing, not enough of another. A dozen rows of canned green beans, but barely any bread. No milk, no snacks. No delivery crates in the back. No expiration dates on the labels. It was like the stock just appeared, and just as I was placing the last can on the shelf, the lights flickered once. I paused, waited. They flickered again, then silence. That kind of thick silence that makes your skin itch. And within that minute, the third flicker came. This one lasted longer, too long. The lights buzzed, stuttered, and dipped into full darkness for a breath, then blinked back to life dim, as if even the store itself was tired, or resisting something. I stood still, frozen. I didn't know what I was waiting for until I heard it. A footstep, just one. Then another, slow, heavy, steady. They weren't coming fast, but they were coming dog closer. Whoever or whatever it wasn't in a rush. And it wasn't trying to be quiet either. My fingers had gone numb around the cart handle. Rule 5, if the lights flicker more than twice in a minute, stop all work immediately and hide until 1 a.m. My heartbeat climbed into my throat. I let go of the cart and began backing away, moving as quietly as I could across the scuffed tile. The aisles around me seemed to shift, shelves towering like skeletons under those flickering lights. Their shadows twisted across the floor, long and jagged, like they could reach out and pull me in. My eyes searched the store. I needed to hide. Fast. That's when the footsteps, once slow and deliberate, broke into a full sprint. Whatever it was, it had stopped pretending. I didn't think. I just ran, heart hammering against my ribs, breath sharp in my throat as I tore down the aisle, desperate for any place to hide. The employee office, the door near the stockroom. I remembered it from earlier. The footsteps were right. Behind me, now pounding, frantic, inhumanly fast. I reached the door just as the lights cut out completely. Pitch black. I slammed into the wall, palms scraping across rough plaster as I fumbled for the doorknob. 5 full seconds. That's how long I was blind, vulnerable, exposed, my fingers clawing in the dark while whatever was chasing me gained ground. Slipped inside the office, slammed the door shut, and turned the lock with a soft, deliberate click. Darkness swallowed the room. I didn't dare turn on my phone's light. Instead, I crouched low, pressing my back flat against the cold wall, every breath shaking in my chest. My heart thundered like a drumbeat in a silent theater. I had no idea what time it was, no clue how long I'd have to stay hidden. I didn't even know what was waiting out there in the dark. I stayed there, frozen in the dark, listening at first. Every creak made my chest seize. Every whisper of wind outside the walls sounded like breathing. But after a while, the silence settled, and somewhere in that suffocating quiet, sleep crept in. I must have dozed off just for a moment, because I woke with a jolt as the overhead lights buzzed and flickered back on, casting a pale glow on the office floor. I blinked, hard, disoriented, then fumbled for my phone. 1:15 a.m., damn it, I muttered, voice hoarse and cracked. Whatever the hell was going on in this store, I didn't want any part of it. But my train of thought was cut short by a soft ding from the front counter. The bell, the reception bell. Is anyone there? A woman's voice, gentle but firm. Too calm for this hour. I froze, every instinct screaming for me to stay put. But Rule 4 whispered in the back of my mind, do not acknowledge or engage with any visitors after 2 a.m. They are not here for the store. But it wasn't 2 a.m. yet. So, against every ounce of better judgment, I pushed myself to my feet, knees stiff, back aching, and slowly crept toward the register. And that's when I saw her. She stood perfectly still at the counter, hands folded neatly in front of her, pale as frost, skin like cracked porcelain pulled from the freezer. Her hair spilled down in heavy, straight strands, grey and black, striped like static on an old analog screen. She wore a long, dark coat, perfectly still, perfectly pressed, and she was smiling, polite, measured, almost mechanical, but her eyes didn't smile. They just stared. Something about her felt wrong. Not in the way people can be strange, in the way things pretend to be people. She looked human, almost. Can I help you? I asked, my voice shakier than I wanted it to be. Part of me was hoping she wouldn't answer. Her smile twitched, a little, too sharp, too rehearsed. Yes, she said. The word hung in the air, cold and smooth, like it had been repeated to a mirror one too many times. I'm looking for something. I hesitated. What kind of something? She tilted her head slowly, mechanically, like she wasn't used to the weight of it. Do you guys have meat? She asked. The word hit harder than it should. Single quotes, VA meat. My blood ran cold. Meat. I stammered, my voice thinned with each word. She didn't move, didn't blink, just stared. Didn't you get a new shipment tonight? She asked, still calm, still smiling, and that's when it hit me. I had stocked meat tonight. Not in the aisle, but in the freezer in the back room. 2 vacuum-sealed packs. No label, no origin. Just sitting there when I opened the store's delivery crate. 2 silent, shrink-wrapped slabs of something. And that was all the meat in the entire store, just those 2. Yes, I said, barely louder than a whisper. You can find it in the back, in the frozen section. She looked at me, not for a second, not for 10, but for 2 full minutes. She didn't move, didn't blink, just stood there, that same polite smile frozen across a face that didn't breathe, couldn't breathe, and then she said it. Thank you, Remy. My stomach dropped. I never told her my name, and my uniform didn't even have a nameplate. But before I could react, she turns low, mechanical, and began walking down the back hallway. That's when I saw them, her feet. They weren't aligned with her body, angled just slightly toward the entrance, like she'd walked in backward and never fixed it. As she walked out, those misaligned feet shuffling against the linoleum, I stayed frozen behind the counter, eyes locked on her until she disappeared into the back hallway. Silence returned, thick and heavy. I waited. 1 second, then 10, then a full minute. No sound, no footsteps, no freezer door opening, just silence. I should have stayed behind the counter. I knew I should have. But something pulled at me. Curiosity, stupidity, a need to know if those meat packs were even still there. So I moved. I moved down the hallway, 1 cautious step at a time. The overhead lights buzzed, softly, no flickering, just a steady, dull, dimmer than before, almost like they didn't want to witness what was ahead. The backroom door stood open. I hesitated at the threshold, heart hammering in my chest. The freezer was closed, exactly how I'd left it, but she was gone. Number, trace of her, no footprints, no sound. Then I noticed one of the meat packets was missing. My stomach turned, and that's when I heard it. Ding, the soft chime of the front doorbell. I bolted back toward the front, sneakers slipping on the tile. By the time I reached the counter, the door was already swinging shut with a gentle click. Outside, empty. Parking lot, inside, no one. She was gone, and I collapsed. My knees gave out beneath me as panic took over. My heart pounding so hard I thought it might tear through my chest. My breath came in short gasps. Every instinct screamed, run, escape, get out. But then I remembered Rule 6, do not exit the premises during your scheduled shift unless explicitly authorized. I stared at the front door like it might bite me. I couldn't leave. I was trapped. My hands were trembling. I needed to regroup, breathe, think. I stumbled to the employee restroom and splashed cold water on my face, hoping it would shock my mind back into something resembling calm. And that's when I saw it in the mirror. Wedged between the glass and the frame was a folded piece of paper, just barely sticking out. I pulled it free and opened it. 4 words, bold, smeared, urgent. Don't accept the promotion. What the hell? I whispered. I stepped out of the bathroom in a daze, the note still clutched in my hand, and made my way back to the stockroom, trying to focus on something normal, sorting, stacking, anything to distract myself from whatever this was. That's when I saw it. A stairwell, half hidden behind a row of unmarked boxer steps leading down. The hallway at the bottom stretched into a wide, dark tunnel that ended at a heavy iron door. I felt my stomach twist. The basement, the one from Rule 1, never enter the basement. I shouldn't have even looked, but I did. I peeked at the closed door, and that's when I heard it. A voice, muffled, desperate. Let me out. Bang, please. Another voice cried, pounding the door from the other side. Then another, and another, a rising chorus of fists. And please. The sound of multiple people screaming like their souls were on fire. Blood-curdling, ragged, animalistic. I turned and ran, bolted across the store, sprinting in the opposite direction, away from the basement, away from those voices. The farther I got, the quieter it became. By the time I reached the far side of the store, it was silent again, as if no one had ever spoken, as if no one had screamed, as if that door at the bottom of the stairs didn't exist. Then the bell at the reception desk rang. Ding. I froze. Rule 4 punched through my fog of fear. Do not acknowledge or engage with any visitors after 2 a.m. They are not here for the store. I slowly turned toward the clock hanging at the center of the store. 2:35 a.m. The bell rang again, harder this time, more impatient. I was directly across the store, hidden behind an aisle. Far from the counter, I crouched low and peeked through a gap between shelves. And what I saw chilled me to the bone. It wasn't a person. It was a creature crouched on all fours, nearly 6 feet tall and hunched. Its skin was hairless, stretched and raw like sun-scorched flesh. Its limbs were too long. Its fingers curled around the edge of the counter like claws. And its face, it had no eyes. Just a gaping, unhinged jaw so wide. I couldn't tell if it was screaming or simply unable to close. It turned its head in my direction. It didn't need eyes to know then. The alarm went off. Rule 10 echoed in my head like a warning bell. If the emergency alarm sounds, cease all tasks immediately and remain still. Do not speak. Do not move until the sound stops, and ignore the voice that speaks. The sirens wailed through the store shrill and disorienting. I froze, forcing every muscle in my body to go still. I didn't even dare to blink. And then, beneath the screech of the alarm, came the voice, low and crooked, not human. Remy, in aisle 6. Report to the reception. The voice repeated it again, warped and mechanical like it was being dragged through static. Remy, in aisle 6. Come to the desk. I didn't move, didn't breathe, but my eyes, my traitorous eyes, drifted upward, and what I saw made my stomach drop through the floor. Aisle 6. I was in aisle 6. The second I realized it, I heard it move. The thing near the desk snapped its head and launched, forward charging down the store like it had been waiting for this cue. I didn't wait. I didn't think, just thought, screw this, and ran. The sirens only got louder. Harsher shadows started slithering out from between shelves, writhing like smoke with claws reaching, grasping. Every step I took felt like outrunning death itself. The creature was behind me now, fast and wild, crashing through displays, howling without a mouth that ever closed. The shadows weren't far behind, hungry, screaming through the noise. I turned sharply toward the back hallway, toward the only place left, the stairwell. I shoved the basement door open and slipped behind it at the last second, flattening myself. Behind the frame, just as the creature skidded through. It didn't see me, it didn't even hesitate. It charged down the stairs, dragging the shadows with it into the dark. I slammed the door shut and twisted the handle. Click, it auto-locked. Thank God. The pounding began immediately. Fists sore, claws beating against the other side. Screams inhuman, layered. Dozens of voices all at once rose from beneath the floor like a chorus of the damned. I collapsed beside the door, chest heaving, soaked in sweat. Every nerve in my body was fried, my thoughts scrambled and spinning. I sat there for what felt like forever, maybe an hour, maybe more, while the screams continued until they faded into silence. Eventually, I dragged myself to the break room. No sirens, no voices, just the hum of the fridge and the buzz of old lights. I made myself coffee with shaking hands. Not because I needed it, because I didn't know what else to do. I stared at the cup like it might offer answers to questions I was too tired, too scared to ask. All I could think was, God, I hope I never come back. But even as the thought passed through me, I knew it was a lie. The contract said 1 year, 1 full year of this madness, and there was no getting out. By the time 6 a.m. rolled around, the store had returned to its usual suffocating quiet, like nothing had ever happened. Then the bell above the front door jingled. The old man walked in. He paused when he saw me sitting in the break room. Alive, you're still here? He asked, genuinely surprised. I looked up, dead-eyed. No shit, Sherlock. He let out a low chuckle, almost impressed. Told you, it wasn't your average night shift. But I think this is the first time a newbie has actually made it through the first night. Not an average night shift doesn't mean you die on the clock. Old man, I muttered. He brushed off the criticism with a shrug. You followed the rules. That's the only reason you're still breathing. I swallowed hard, my voice barely steady. Can I quit? His eyes didn't even flicker. Nope. The contract says 1 year. I already knew that, but it still stung hearing it out. Loud, but, he added, casually, there's a way out. I looked up slowly, wary. You can leave early, he said, if you get promoted. That word stopped me cold. Don't accept the promotion. The note in the bathroom flashed through my mind like a warning shot. Promotion, I asked, carefully. Measuring the word. Not many make it that far, he said, matter of fact. No emotion, no concern. Like he was stating the weather. I didn't respond, just stared. He slid an envelope across the table. Inside, my paycheck, $500, for 1 night of surviving hell. You earned it, he said, standing. Uniform Rackle, have your size ready by tonight. See you at 11. Then he walked out, calm, routine, like we'd just finished another late shift at a grocery store. But nothing about this job was normal. And if not many make it to the promotion, that could only mean one thing. Most don't make it at all. I pocketed the check and stepped out into the pale morning light. The parking lot was still. Just still, I walked to my car, every step echoing louder than it should have. I slid into the driver's seat, hands gripping the wheel knuckles white. I sat there for a long time, engine off, staring at the rising sun, thinking, wondering if I'd be stupid enough to come back tomorrow, and knowing, deep down, I would.